a new national unit for operational affairs announced by the military chief advocate general Tomer Yerushalmi, head of the military justice system in Israel. What are we talking about?
There was a piece in the Jerusalem Post on August 24th, an opinion piece by David Ben Bassat titled, "Israel Must Respect Its Soldiers as Stay Teman Probe Continues." Now, Stay Teman, of course, was the prison where allegations of sexual misconduct against Nukba terrorists.
Supposedly abuse against Islamo-Nazi terrorists incarcerated in that facility, which of course have proved to be completely without basis and false.
False. That attorney Adi Kedar, a legal advisor to Honenu, who also represents
Honenu, I should mention for those who do not know, is a legal advocacy organization.
Correct. A very credible organization. He represents some of the military detainees accused of sexual or physical harm to the Hamas prisoners. He said, quote, and I want to be accurate about this because when I've discussed this with other people, they said I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, listen to this. Quote, obviously this, and by that, this effort to go after these poor soldiers who were accused without evidence of physical and sexual abuse of these Hamas prisoners. This is an attempt to prove to the court in The Hague how righteous we are, said Kedar, regarding the establishment of the National Unit for Operational Affairs. This organization is tasked with investigating alleged misconduct by members of the IDF and providing the information to the military advocate general. Well, that sounds pretty mundane. I mean, that's what military investigators look at, misconduct. However, he went on to say that while the unit had ostensibly been established to investigate criminal events, its entire purpose was external, towards The Hague. He said that everything was geared towards showing the world that in the midst of this war, we are investigating ourselves. Now, this is what you said when we first started discussing this horrible situation.
The persecution of Israeli combat soldiers who are fighting for the survival of the Jewish people.
Correct.
Which is Jewish people, which is faced with a second Holocaust as we speak.
Based on the solicited allegations of Islamo-Nazis. Okay, which is why, for example, just parenthetically, I am utterly opposed to allowing the Red Cross, for example, in to see these prisoners. There are two organizations right now, NGOs, the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, which is a misnomer, and the Physicians for Human Rights in Israel, who have petitioned the High Court to basically force the government to allow the Red Cross to have access to the Hamas prisoners. I had two reactions to that. Number one, you know very well what's going to happen. The Red Cross will come out from their investigations and say there's massive rape and sexual abuse that's occurred. Okay, there'll be a very coordinated effort by these guys, these Hamasnikim, to push this lie. And the second thing was a bit of advice that I had for the Israeli government. Okay, little bit of advice. Break off all relations with the Red Cross now. And just say that because of their background, for example, during the Khurban, and because their refusal.
You refer to the Holocaust of the Second World War.
The Holocaust, where they basically didn't care about seriously investigating what happened in the concentration camps. And their deplorable lack of professionalism with regard to our hostages and concern for them. just simply break off all relations with them and say we can't deal with it. That way, you can report to the high court that the reason we're not letting them near these professional liars is because we can't have anything to do with them. They're not professional, they're not credible, they're not reliable. Okay, that's parenthetical. So now you have this National Unit for Operational Affairs going after soldiers for crimes that, well, don't exist, never existed. Now, I want you to remember this fact, or people listening to this podcast, to remember that the Judge Advocate General, this Major General Yerushalmi, is going to battle stations right now over the solicited allegations of sexual misconduct by our sacred soldiers. Why do I want people to remember that? Because there's another case that just came up that just shows how hypocritical and downright dangerous the Judge Advocate General, Major General Yerushalmi, and her entire division of commissars actually is right now. And what is this? Before going into this case, I want to make sure that people understand that the facts of this case are not in dispute. Okay. A female Israeli soldier was brutally raped by an Arab Israeli soldier. That fact is not in dispute. Now, what happened, curiously enough, in most cases like this, if the facts are not in dispute, the defendant, this Arab Israeli soldier, will be sentenced and he'll go to jail, prison. But that's not what happened here. This girl, this victim, this Jewish girl, was forced into a mediation session. Now, a mediation session is where the two sides really have truth on their side. Okay. This never should have gone to mediation because the facts were indisputable. Okay, so
what is
went to mediation.
What is there to mediate?
Correct. Well, this case, the mediator was an army judge a female army judge by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Michal Amram Shachar. And boy, she again is from Central Casting if you're looking for a rabid, woke, regressive, who's also involved, by the way, deeply in the state theme on persecutions. Okay, so what did she do? This so-called judge, and I say so-called because she doesn't exhibit any characteristics that I would consider worthy of a judge, told this victim, quote, "You must have mercy on him, the rapist, and forgive him, just as Jews can forgive terrorists who harmed their own," end quote. This is from the transcript, by the way. Now, the soldier, this victim, this poor girl, later went on Channel 14 with her back to the camera because, well, the details of her situation are rather dire. And in this interview, she said the experience had left her with trauma for all her life. Indeed. Now, the judge, according to the transcript, said the following. The rapist, she called him a rapist, is a person who wants to continue his life, wants to continue public service, and therefore should be forgiven. Now, the reason I want the people to remember the cases of the alleged Nukba sexual assault on the alleged sexual assaults on the Nukba terrorists is all this concern being directed at that issue. And here's this girl where the facts are, quote, not in dispute. And they're just blowing it off. Okay. There's been no reaction from any leftist feminist organization in this matter, no doubt, because the rapist is an Arab Israeli, but still
a noble savage.
Correct. There hasn't been any editorial on this issue in any of the major or even minor Israeli newspapers. I sent this story to every major editor-in-chief in Israel. There hasn't been one editorial or op-ed written about this at all. It just wasn't worthy. As I said, the media, nothing. The Knesset, God knows how many MKs I sent this story to, saying, you've got to hold a hearing on this. Nothing. What we need to do, I think, is some major surgery. The judge in this case, this Lieutenant Colonel Michal Amram Shacher, and Yerushalmi herself, the Judge Advocate General, Major General Yerushalmi, should be immediately dismissed. The Judge Advocate General's office should be disbanded, pending reorganization. And certainly the National Unit for Operational Affairs should also be immediately disbanded, because it's not really a legal organization seeking truth. It's a left-wing, woke, regressive organization designed to smear our army and to protect certain individuals from possible sanctions from the International Criminal Court. It has nothing to do with the law or a search for the truth. We have a major problem in the army that doesn't have to, okay, we have a major problem with the high command that needs to be corrected. But here is this organization that has literally run amok and has infiltrated the army to such an extent that tactical units have been assigned what I call legal commissars, kind of in the same tradition as the communists put commissars down into tactical units, where the commissars could overrule the Soviet army officers, on-site army officers. When people hear this, they can't believe it. But again, truth is stranger than fiction in this matter. So the fact that nobody is talking about this case and this organization that's been created doesn't make it any less important. In fact, it makes it more important because it's so egregious, the creation of this unit and the treatment of this girl, that it's obvious that the left is trying very hard to operationalize it. On the one hand, operationalize its persecution of soldiers in order to, protect themselves. And on the other hand, to protect an Arab Israeli soldier, a noble savage, if you will, who brutally raped a Jewish girl. Now, when I look at my daughters, I have to keep this in mind. Do I actually want to endanger the lives of my daughters, not just from the avowed enemies we have, like Hamas and the Hezbollah, people like that, but from our own military judicial system, where one of them, God forbid, could be brutally assaulted, wrecked for life, and the rapist just is let go because, he's a noble savage. So
I should point out that many, many decades ago, going back 75 plus years, the great Torah sage known as the Chazon Ish, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, of blessed memory, a true Torah giant, expressed his view openly and explicitly that a Jewish girl may not, under any circumstances, including threat of death. He said so, and he meant what he said. A Jewish girl may not enlist in the army, and he also added any what is still known as national service, Sherut Leumi. He was entirely opposed to these things. He said this is not to be allowed, and it is what's called in halachic terms in Hebrew, yahareir wa'al ya'avor. In other words, a person should rather allow themselves to be killed than go along with such coercion. And this is what you've just described is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons for that position, which I endorse.
It's hard.
Not that the Chazon Ish requires my endorsement or approbation, not at all. But I wish it to be clear that I am of that view.
Well, when you have a girl, a young Jewish girl, who has been so violated by an animal, who is excused by the military judicial system, and who, at her personal risk to her reputation, goes on national TV here on Channel 14 and tells her story, and where the facts are indisputable. The transcript is available of this mediation, and nobody says anything.
The fact that I was completely unaware of this case until you mentioned it to me last week is proof of what you're saying.
I've talked to a lot of friends of mine who are lawyers, and they couldn't believe it. I provided them with the information. They called me back, and they basically said they were stunned that it went to mediation. When you have an open and shut case where the facts are not in dispute, where the judge in the mediation case calls the defendant a rapist and then says he has to be excused. Couldn't help himself. Just was overcome with lust. Oh, please. You're going to put your girl, I'm going to put my daughters in that kind of situation? I don't think so.
No, I do not think so either.
No, I just can't do it.
My dear friend Jonathan, so I wanted to thank you once again for a very interesting and enlightening conversation, as always, which I know is greatly appreciated by our many viewers. May Hashem bless you and keep you, and may we see the destruction of all our enemies, foreign and domestic. Shalom u'nisahon, peace and victory. All the best to you.
Amen.
Shalom.
Shalom.